everybody. Welcome to In This Corner, the podcast. A buck 34 is where I think we're at. Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments, of which we have a double dip today. And we do it all with boxing writer, author, CompuBox counter, historian, and one lovable guy from friendly West Virginia, Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
I guess you gave me an upgrade. I'm actually a good guy, but you called me lovable, so I got a
Well,
promotion.
it's just what's in the air. The weather's changing in Vegas. The temperatures are going down, which brings my joy up a couple of notches. But we got a lot to get to. No guests today, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to do some recaps and some previews. And as I mentioned, if you will, tease a little bit about the memories and moments that we'll wrap up with later on.
Yeah, we were discussing what we were going to do for the memories and moments, and we came up with a couple of memorable cards, one of which marked the end of two Hall of Fame careers on the same card. And then there was perhaps the fight when it comes to having it being held at the right time, with the right opponents, the right time. Everything was marinated correctly. It served as the gold standard of how to build up a fight and then have that particular fight more than live up to the hype.
Yeah, and we'll get to those, but let's start out. Of course, we've got what was a pretty big fight card. I think it did a 750,000 buys, so I'm hearing. I'm talking about Canelo and Berlanga,
Big
the
number.
card. So I'll just toss it to you, and I'll bob and weave in and out.
Well, the pay-per-view portion of the show that was on Amazon Prime kicked off with former WBA 140-pound titleist Rolando Raleigh Romero outpointing Manuel Jaimes over 10 rounds. Last week, I said that of all the fights on this card, this was the one that was ripe for an upset, but I was wrong. And I was wrong because the Manuel Jaimes who fought last weekend wasn't the same guy I saw while doing CompuBox research. The high work rate just wasn't there for Jaimes, and part of the reason was Raleigh. He slowed the pace. He kept Jaimes at long range. He landed the harder shots, and he won almost every round. I think this was Raleigh's best performance since stopping Anthony Yiggett more than 3 years ago. And because of that, the Raleigh show is gonna roll on. So, what did you think of Raleigh's performance? I know you've been a critic of his, but has your opinion of him improved or worsened or stayed the
Yeah, and
same?
I don't
Or
even think I'm a critic of his. I just think I'm the best eyes in boxing, and I tell it like it is, and I don't get overly infatuated like all the little boxing pundit. Oh, it's Raleigh. I'll interview Raleigh. I'll interview this. He's a club fighter with a heavy punch. And I give him, we were just before we started, I was giving him some credit to you. To me, he's a more legitimate fighter than Ryan Garcia. He's not better, but he's more legit with what he does. I am worried about him I'm not going to get into it on this show, but just little things, watching him talk and listening to him, and with the amount of clean punches he's taking, I'm at a point in my life and career where I worry about guys like that. I'm not going to be as critical of him as I used to be. I just wish him the best, and I hope he stays healthy. But he's a club fighter with a big punch. And that big punch is what kept the opponent off and made your prediction not come to fruition. You weren't calling for the upset. You said it might take place, so you weren't really wrong. So that's what I think. And we'll move on.
yeah. And next up was the fight that actually came pretty close to producing that upset, and that was Caleb Plant against Trevor McCumbee for the WBA's interim belt at 168. And while Plant scored a ninth round TKO, McCumbee acquitted himself quite well. He actually scored a knockdown in round 4 Whether that was a legitimate knockdown, that remains to be seen.
And he hurt him. He
Both
hurt
looked good.
Caleb prior to that and even after that. That was the
He
fight of the
did.
night, but continue. Yeah.
He did. He stunned him on several other occasions, as you said. But Plant turned the fight by making a most unlikely adjustment. And I think he was acting on the advice of Stephen Breadman Edwards, his chief second, and he told him to move inside. And when he did, he pelted him with these short, crisp power shots, piled up points, piled up the damage. He opened a cut over McCombie's left eye, and he prompted the stoppage with a barrage of power shots. Now, there was a mild protest because the stoppage came just as the bell was ringing, but that was pretty short lived, and it looked like McCombie probably would have been stopped if he had been allowed to come out for the next round. Plant was fighting for the first time in nearly 18 months. It took him time to shake off the ring rust. But once he did, he got the job done. And as for McCombie, he really exceeded expectations. And because of that, I think he'll be earning some more paydays.
One of the things, Caleb, I want to give him credit for. You mentioned that adjustment coming on the inside, and he did some really cool stuff. Some Duran, dare I compare Caleb to Duran, but some Duran type stuff on the inside when McCombie had his hands up. Caleb on the inside would take his, for example, his right hand glove and bat the hand and then come over or under. He did some slick ass shit, to be honest with you. He really did, and give him credit along with his corner man there, his trainer. But I just wish, and I don't. We've had Caleb on. I like Caleb. He's gone through a lot in his life, but Caleb, you don't have to be a tough guy anymore. You don't have to say, "Come on down, come on up, or come down from the stands and get over here with me." And you're a fighter, man. You won a world title. There's no need in the world. You've already proven yourself in what you've gone through in your personal life with tragedy, losing a child. Again, maybe it's the weather. Feel the joy, man. You've already, in my opinion, he's already over exceeded as a prize fighter. And he's a good one. And he's still getting a little bit better. I think activity, we talk about that enough, more activity would help him. But there's so much more. And yeah, we'll see McCombie again. Dude brings new meaning to heavy hands. He's just got heavy hands, He clubs you to death. And I think they have a new profound respect for one another, those two.
Well, the getting in the ring and fighting each other tends to do that, doesn't
That's right.
it? So as exciting as Plant versus McCombie was, that's really how predictable the co-main event between WBA middleweight champion Erislandy Lara and former two-division titleist Danny Garcia ended up being. At age 41, Lara remains a very effective fighter, and he used his boxing skills to keep Garcia on the outside and to limit Garcia's offensive opportunities. Garcia is 36 years old. He was fighting for the first time in more than 2 years. And for the second time in nearly 4 years, he fought. He just couldn't shed the rust. Last week, I predicted that Garcia would be stopped for the first time in his career. And that's what happened. Lara floored him in the final moments of round 9, after which Garcia's father, Angel, stopped the fight between rounds 9 and 10.
Yeah.
And even though Garcia hasn't said it at the time of taping, it's pretty obvious that this should mark the end of his career. And he's really done well for himself. He saved his money. He's created a new promotional company. And like fellow Philadelphia native Bernard Hopkins, he's gotten into real estate. He really has nothing left to prove. And as for Lara, he scored his 4th straight knockout. He moves on to the next challenger. And guess who is the WBA's mandatory challenger? Shane Mosley Jr. So if the WBA follows its rules, that's who he may fight next.
Yeah. And let me explain something to you. It's not shaking off rust when you're that old. He's rusted. You can shake off like a tool that gets a little, a newer tool, a tool that's 2 or 3 years old can get some water on it and it rusts a little bit and you can spray it, and loosen it up and it's fine. But
Mhm.
if that same tool has been sitting there for 40 years, it's rusted. It's beyond shaking it off. It ain't being, you throw it away. And in the case of Danny, what you do is you retire. You call it a
Mhm.
day. He went down on his own from a jab. And it
Mhm.
wasn't even really a power jab. He knew something wasn't right. He knew he couldn't react. And we just got to start calling this stuff for what it is. I mean, he's well beyond. And as for Laura, the reason, Lee, that Laura can go on and do more is his style allows him to actually prevent the rust because of his style and the way he fights, picking and choosing. It's not as hard on a fighter's body when you fight that style, other than the training and what goes into it. But and because of his guile and his style, that is why he's able to do this. But let's not BS the audience. As soon as he gets in there against somebody younger, and I don't know who that person is in that division right now, given I doubt it'll be Mosley Jr. Again,
Mhm.
and I like Mosley Jr. a lot. He's really improving, but um, he's like in my opinion, like a B fighter. Laura used to be a
Maybe
def.
Janabek, who holds two of the belts. Janabek
Yeah. So when
would
when
probably be it.
Laura does that and goes up, but Danny's had a wonderful career. We can, Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that later at some other time. But yeah, it kind of it looked bad. It felt bad. What was good about it is Danny didn't get hurt. And with what's going on with him and his father, I just think that just get out and enjoy what you've accomplished, which is a lot, by the way.
Yeah, it really has. Now on to the main event. All four members of our panel last week predicted that Saul Canelo Alvarez would beat Edgar Berlanga, and we were correct. But none of us thought that Berlanga would last the distance. And to his credit, he did.
Yeah.
The scores were lopsided. Two of them had it 118 to 109. The other had it 117, 110. And he was floored with just a gorgeous hook to the jaw. But Berlanga hung tough against a pretty good version of Saul Alvarez. One possible reason for that, rehydration. Berlanga reportedly weighed 193 inside the ring, and that's 25 and a quarter pounds heavier than he weighed at the weigh-in. And that brings me back to what Alvarez said regarding why he wouldn't fight David Benavidez for anything less than $200 million. And here's the quote, all I see is that Benavidez weighs 25 or 30 pounds more than I do on the day of the fight. I have no problem with that. But if you want me to fight with him, it's $200 million, end quote. Seems like Alvarez did just fine with a man who put on 25 pounds after the weigh-in.
Yeah.
And so this confirms what you and I have been saying all along. It's not the extra weight that worries Canelo. It's Benavidez' talent that concerns him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I said, I tweeted right after the fight that I thought that he was facing a guy 20. Well, I said that I thought Berlanga looked like a 190-pound guy. I was off a little
Yeah.
bit, apparently. And that extra bulk probably did keep him in there. It's really hard when you're, not that Canelo's 140 pounds and he's 147 pounds anymore. But pushing around a big guy like that, knocking around a big guy like that. And I think that's why Canelo delayed the broadcast by lathering himself up extra 5 or 10 minutes in the dressing room. He wanted to come out guns, redheaded guns a blazing, and he did. He really came out fast and looked great and nearly got this. Well, I don't know if he nearly got the stoppage, but he certainly hurt him. But to Berlanga's credit, I will say Berlanga performed better than I thought he would. He didn't win much, and maybe he won one round, two round, but he comported himself better than I thought he would. And it
Mhm.
was I think almost like a glorified sparring session for Canelo, who did what he had to do. And now, and we've spent a lot of time talking about this. Now is, okay, what does he do now? Does he do the Benavidez and then sign off? Does he go for the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev? Or does he do what I think he would be the best bet if he could pull it off? Fight Bud Crawford, a smaller guy, safer guy, and and still make that huge money. So I think he'll weigh all of that, and then we'll find out. He looked pretty doggone good, but I see slippage in Canelo. I do see it, but he still, even with slippage, boy, he still slips and punches pretty damn good. So he's got a few years left in him. We'll see what he decides to do.
Well, I think that one reason why Canelo has been looking good in recent fights is that quality of opposition.
Yeah.
He's fighting guys with at least one or two major flaws in them that he could exploit. In Berlanga's case, it was simply not on his level when it comes to talent.
He's doing what Floyd did in many ways. He learned a lot from Floyd, didn't he? Even in little things in the ring, but the path of least resistance is what the redhead does. And we're going to take a path to a commercial break. And when we come back, what do we got? We're going to do some previews, right? AJ and Dubois.
That's right. Yeah, and a couple of fights on the undercard as well.
We'll do that after you see this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast 134. I'll probably mention this again at the end, but we will not be with you next week. I have a couple of visits to the dentist that are going to prevent me from making the broadcast. But anyway, what do we got? AJ and Dubois. I'm looking forward to that main event that'll take place. That's going to be a pretty good fight, I think, for as long as it lasts.
Yeah, DAZN pay-per-view will stream a card emanating from Wembley Stadium. And one of the big attractions is that there could be a historically large crowd that will be assembling there. Now, Wembley's standard capacity is 90,000, but Turki Al-Sheikh received permission to expand it to 96,000, which would break the stadium's previous record of 94,000, which was set in April 2022 when Tyson Fury fought Dillian White. You and I have complained about boxing standing in America, and rightfully so. But in the UK, the sweet science remains a seriously high-profile sport. And this, I think, is a manifestation of it. Now, one of the big reasons that there are going to be potentially 96,000 people there is the main event. And the main event is going to feature a pair of Brits. Daniel Dubois of London will defend the IBF heavyweight title vacated by Alexander Usyk. He'll be defending that belt for the first time against Watford's Anthony Joshua, who will attempt to claim a share of the heavyweight title for the third time. Now, Joshua has breathed new life into his career with 4 straight wins, the last 3 by knockout, following his second loss to Usyk. Joshua was last seen scorching Francis Ngannou inside of 2 rounds, while Dubois has gained a boatload of confidence following his back-to-back knockout wins against Gerald Miller and Filip Hrgović. Here are a couple of stats that capture the appeal of this match. First, Dubois and Joshua have combined to win 49 fights, 45 of them by knockout. And second, 3 of their 5 losses have also been by knockout. So it's, I'll get you or you get me. That's the kind of fight, especially at heavyweight, that's very, very appealing. And statistically speaking, this should be a fight that will be low on output, but high on punching power, edge of your seat stuff. I'm predicting that Joshua will stop Dubois in round 7. How do you see it?
Yeah, that's sounds pretty damn good to me. I think as soon as he really touches Dubois, because I think Dubois is a little chinny. I don't know if you think that's an reach there, but I think he's a little chinny. Not that AJ has the greatest beard or head either, but AJ has that power and he knows how to set it up. And I think Dubois, to his credit, he's riding high now, and he's going to make it an interesting fight until it's not. So somewhere between, I would say 6 and 9 on this one. I expect AJ to win, but could have some interesting moments early.
Very, very much so. Dubois can really punch, but Dubois also is the little bit smaller, has a little less reach. AJ knows how to use that jab to keep guys away from him, and he's got that big bomb. All you have to do is watch his last fight with Ngannou to see how much power he still has at age 34.
And I know you got some stuff on the undercard you want to mention.
Yeah, there are a few worth mentioning, I think. You and I are always quick to criticize the sanctioning bodies, and believe me, they've given us plenty of material, but we're also quick to compliment them when they do something right. Now, originally, Anthony Cacace was supposed to risk his newly won IBF title at 130 pounds against former two-time featherweight king Josh Warrington. And the match didn't make sense, at least as far as the rules, is because Warrington was getting a title shot despite having never fought at 130 and despite coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak, including a 7th-round TKO to then WBA featherweight champion Lee Wood in his most recent fight nearly a year ago. But on Monday, the IBF ruled that while Cacace can still fight Warrington, it's an attractive domestic fight, the belt won't be on the line. Now, we've seen many examples of sanctioning bodies ignoring their rules in order to chase the next dollar. We only have to look back to last weekend with Erislandy Lara and Danny Garcia. But here, I think the IBF did the right thing, and for that, I applaud them. How about you?
Anytime any sanctioning body in boxing could do even something that looks like it might be close to being what should be done, I applaud them for doing what they should do.
Now, as far as the result, I think that Cacace, he's long, he's tall, he's a southpaw. He knows how to dictate range. Warrington's a dangerous guy. He's very aggressive, but I'm picking Cacace by a pretty comfortable decision. And the other fights that intrigue me include middleweight Hamza Shiraz. He's going to be challenging Tyler Denny for the European middleweight title. The undefeated Shiraz is 20-0, and he has stopped his last 14 opponents. And I expect him to extend that streak to 15 against Denny, who's a bit of an overachiever. And the other bout features undefeated knockout artist Mark Chamberlain, a favor of the Turk, who will face fellow unbeaten Josh Padley. My pick, Chamberlain by knockout. And there's some other cards that I'm looking forward to seeing. We'll see how everything turns out later on.
You know, I heard that I guess Usyk on his way over there ran into a little bit of an issue at an airport, right?
Yeah, he was detained. He didn't seem too upset about it.
Was that in Poland? Was that in Poland?
I think it was in Poland, yeah. But he was detained, and I saw his tweet saying that it was a misunderstanding and that everything is fine and that he will be at ringside. He'll be one of the 96,000 at Wembley to witness AJ do his thing. And who knows, it might, if AJ wins and if Usyk wins, they could have a third fight. Or if Fury wins, you could have that big 100,000 seat Wembley spectacle, Fury versus AJ for undisputed. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And what we're going to hear about when we come back from the break, we have a pair of memories and moments. One that, for me, I never get tired of watching, and I'll tease it by saying Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas the Hitman Hearns, Fight 1. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up, I can get tougher, I can get faster, I can get stronger, and then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner of the podcast, 134, final segment, but a loaded final segment that begins with a pair of fantastic memories and moments regarding the sweet science.
Yeah, we're doing something a little bit different this time with the memories and moments, and that's because we're remembering a pair of events. The first one took place on September 20th, 1972, inside Madison Square Garden, where the Hall of Fame careers of Carlos Ortiz and Floyd Patterson came to an end, both of which while sitting on the stool. In the co-main event, Carlos Ortiz faced Ken Buchanan in a battle of former lightweight champions. Ortiz returned to boxing in December 1971 following a 2-year layoff, and he rolled off 9 straight victories against so-so competition, and that earned him the match against Buchanan, who was fresh off a controversial 13th round TKO loss to Roberto Duran inside that very same Madison Square Garden. Speaking of Duran was supposed to be Ortiz's original opponent, but he had to pull out because he had the flu. Buchanan stepped in on short notice, and he only trained for 6 days for this fight. But then he proceeded to swarm all over the 36-year-old legend from start to finish. Although Ortiz managed to open a cut over Buchanan's right eye in round 4, he no longer had the energy to withstand Buchanan's pressure. And so he remained on his stool between rounds 6 and 7 and said the following afterward, quote, "This was definitely my last fight. I started tiring in the 4th round, and I realized after the 6th that I couldn't go on. I didn't want to make a fool of myself. I was in the best shape I could have been. Time just caught up with me," end quote. Ortiz retired with a record of 61-7-1 with 30 knockouts and was a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame's class of 1991, only the 2nd year. That's a big deal. Ortiz was a staple of the Hall's induction weekend, and he was one of the most popular celebrities there because of the way he interacted with the fans. Not only did he sign every autograph, he behaved as if he was truly honored and thrilled to be recognized. Ortiz died in New York City on June 14th, 2022, and I heard about his passing on the radio while driving home from that induction weekend. What do you remember about Carlos Ortiz?
By the way, you mentioned he was 36, I think. I hope Danny Garcia watches this show, because there was a fighter that was what is Danny? 36? Something 36. Like that. And Carlos realized that he didn't have it anymore, and he did the right thing. And that is why he had a lot of really good years after that. And he was a staple in Canastota. We'll put up a picture here of him and I at Graziano's, and I got a chance from time to time to see him, and he always had a great smile. He's a great guy outside the ring and a magnificent fighter. Where do you put him on the pantheon of the great, for example, Puerto Rican fighters of all time? He's got to be in the top 5.
Certainly in the top 10. You can make a case for top 5.
Yeah.
He was just a superlative technician. He wasn't the biggest puncher in the world, but he didn't have to be. He knew what he was doing in the ring. He was a great ring mechanic.
Great craft.
And he won titles in 2 weight classes, 140 and 135. He beat a collection of a who's who of guys in boxing. And, it was no accident that he was elected in the class of 91 right after the original class was inducted.
And as for Kenny Buchanan, who I got to meet, I got to see him fight on Miami Beach against Frankie Otero when I was a youngster, but I got to meet him in Canastota and have a beverage with him at Graziano's. He's got to be the greatest fighter from Scotland. I mean, he has to be. He was just a beautiful, beautiful boxer. Loved to watch him fight. So those are some big. But what's next? Another big memory.
But before we move on, I have a Kenny Buchanan story as well. One year I was leaving the Book and Memorabilia show and I was on my way to the Hall of Fame grounds, find my parking space, and along the way I saw a lone figure walking on the right side of the road, and it turned out to be Kenny. He didn't have a ride back to the Days Inn, so I pulled over. I asked if he needed a ride. He said sure. He got into my passenger seat, and I drove him to the Days Inn. And when the security people saw my car approaching, they jumped out and they said, no, 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 no. And then I pointed to Kenny. And then the security people saw Kenny and they go, okay, pull in, let him out. I got to talk with Kenny for a couple of minutes. We traded notes, and it was just a great memory. A little, rubbing, getting an experience with a legend, even for a couple of minutes. It was a great memory for me.
Okay.
But moving on to the other part of our memories and moments segment, Floyd Patterson faced Muhammad Ali in the rematch of their November 1965 heavyweight title fight that saw Ali score a 12th round TKO. And like Ortiz, Patterson had returned to the ring after a 2-year layoff in 1970. And like Ortiz, he had won 9 in a row to earn the fight with Ali. As for Ali, he was in the midst of an amazing year. In April, he outpointed Mac Foster in Japan. In May, he decisioned George Chuvalo in Canada. In June, he stopped Jerry Quarry in Las Vegas. And in July, he stopped Alvin Blue Lewis in Ireland.
He ran up a lot of frequent flyer miles. Ali did that, which he was known to do. He epitomized being a world champion.
Even when he wasn't holding the title, he was the champion of boxing. But the 37-year-old Patterson was really fired up to face Ali, and he wanted to prove that what happened in 1965 was not a true reflection of his abilities. Back in 65, he had a bad back, and it had to be stretched between rounds, and that in part led to the TKO victory. The pain just got to be too much. But here, he was fully healthy, and he dominated most of the first 5 rounds, partly because Patterson took the fight to Ali, and also because Ali let him do it. He was kind of playing around. And any visions of a Patterson upset evaporated in round 6 when Ali finally let his hands go. While Patterson still outlanded Ali in that round, the momentum was now in the other direction. And between rounds, Patterson made the mistake of blowing his nose into the towel, and within seconds, his left eye was nearly swollen shut. Ali took advantage of that by landing several clean punches on the eye in round 7, which was now cut and now swollen shut. The ringside physician rushed into the ring after the round, and he recommended to referee Arthur McCanty that the fight should be stopped. Patterson put up a brief argument, but it was the right thing to do. Now, Ali's comments immediately after the fight were very kind. He said the following, quote, "Patterson is a great, great fighter. I thought he'd be nothing, but he surprised me. I didn't knock him out. I didn't get him on a TKO. All I did was close his eye," end quote. Ali added in the ring that he was willing to give Patterson an immediate rematch, but it wasn't to be. He never announced his retirement, but he never fought again. Patterson's final record was 55-8-1 with 40 knockouts, and like Ortiz, he was a member of the IBHOF's class of 1991. He served 2 terms as New York's boxing commissioner, and he was the chief second for his adoptive son, Tracy Harris Patterson, as well as for Donovan Razor Ruddock. He died of Alzheimer's and prostate cancer in 2006 at age 71, and my regard for him remains very strong. So strong that his picture hangs right behind me every week on this show. What are your memories of Floyd Patterson?
Well, as a fighter, he was caught in between, with his size. That was always an issue for him as a heavyweight. We know the debacles with Sonny Liston. He was a little too small for Ali and some of the others. He would have been a perfect cruiserweight, if he were fighting today. He was a beautiful fighter and a great guy. Got to interview him a few times, once in studio in Fort Myers, Florida. And he, very cerebral dude, very cerebral. Had some really interesting things to say. I remember him explaining to me why he never needed to do alcohol or drugs because he got a high from training, and he went on about endorphins, and he was a very intelligent dude. A lot like Archie Moore in that regard, and a great fighter, like Archie Moore. So, I mean, he had a remarkable career, and wish he had lived a little bit longer, as we do for all of them. But yeah, he was a heck of a fighter, and fun to watch in the ring. Again, just a little bit too small. Can you imagine him fighting now in the heavyweight division, right? With these, we talked about AJ and these guys. He'd be a little bit too smallish, but yeah, he was something special. And, that was at a time when I was around Ali, and don't remember whether he trained extensively in Miami for that fight. Ali didn't have to train a lot at that time because he was fighting all the time,
Right.
But anyway, yeah, good stuff. What's next?
Well, the other fight we'll cover in this week's Memories and Moments is the legendary first meeting between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns that took place September 16th, 1981 in Las Vegas. It was the perfect fight that was staged at the perfect time. Both of them were in their 20s. Leonard was 25, Hearns was 22, and both were at the peak of their powers. The first few rounds were rather cat and mouse, but Leonard turned the fight with a hook/uppercut in round 6 that staggered Hearns. And Leonard punished Hearns so badly in the 7th that Emmanuel Stewart was close to stopping the fight. He told Tommy in the corner to box, revert to that style in the amateurs that was so effective for him. And in rounds 8 through 12, he boxed so well that he built a large lead on the scorecards. And then it was Angelo Dundee's turn to step into the mix. Between rounds 12 and 13, he told Leonard, "You're blowing it, son. You're blowing it. You got to take it to him." Leonard responded by flooring Hearns in the 13th and stopping him in the 14th. And at the start of the 14th, Hearns led by 2, 3, and 4 points. So he had to do something. But Leonard, as he often said, he brought it up from the gut, and he got the job done. The two would meet again in 1989, and while most people, including Leonard himself, thought Hearns did enough to win, thanks to his scoring knockdowns in rounds 3 and 11, the fight was scored a draw. Both fights were great for different reasons. The first, because these were two world-class athletes at their very best, and the second, because there was more sustained toe-to-toe action, and it had its share of drama too. Now, I know, Smitty, you have a very high regard for this fight, so much so that even though you've watched it many, many times, it never gets old for you. Why is that?
Yeah, even their second fight, by the way, which we're not going to, well, I won't talk about much. I was at that fight, and I thought, without question, Hearns, who scored a couple of knockdowns, I think, in that fight, I thought he won it. But the first one I watched at my father's house. I didn't spend a lot of time with my dad, but I did on that occasion. And he had a drug dealer from Detroit that was over his house, a really big time drug dealer at the time. And I was a big supporter of Ray Leonard, and it got kind of ugly with me running my mouth to the guy who was the the Tommy Hearns guy. But what a remarkable fight of ebb and flow and back and forth. And, just when you think one guy's taken over, and the adjustments that were made and the stuff that went on in the corners, I've talked to Dundee about it off camera and on camera on my show, and the same with Emmanuel Stewart. And the fact that these two guys met when they met at a time they were just approaching, they might have not even been in their prime yet. They were approaching it, actually, to be, in my opinion.
Especially in Hearns' case. He was 22.
Yeah. And so they were approaching it. And then just the adjustments. We talk about fighters and what makes them great. you don't even want to know how many times. We can ask our friend Amber Renee Dixon, how many times I put that fight on when people would come to my house and watch a fight, that, just to explain, if you come to Smitty's house to watch a pay-per-view and there's any alcohol involved at all, you can bet that the night's going to end up with that great night in it was 81, right? In 19. And I think I watched it, Lee. I bet you could tell. Was it on TV?
It was on TV, yeah.
Yeah, there was a ladies and gentlemen, there was a pay-per-view thing that was called On. And that's how I watched it, on. And what a performance, what a fight. And I don't know if either guy, I mean, Ray Leonard went on to do some great stuff, as did Tommy, but that's kind of the fight that really, just for both of them, it was the fight they will always remember. They both were involved with other fights that people will remember them for. But I think, and I've had them both on, and we'll hear from them a couple of clips. I don't know if we're going to run those now or we're going to run those at the end. That'll be your call. You do the bells and whistles on that. But what a defining fight. And although Ray got the stoppage, was it Davy Pearl? Was Davy Pearl
Davy Pearl was the referee? Yeah.
Although Ray got the stoppage, there really was no loser. There was,
no.
The winners were the fighters who fought that fight, when they fought that fight, and how they fought that fight, and boy, the fans, because I've never seen a better welterweight fight than that fight.
Yeah, and the another amazing aspect of it was they were able to perform at that high level. It was hot in that ring.
Yeah,
it was well over 100 degrees, even after the sun went down, because of the TV lights, because they were in the desert.
Well, it's September right now in Las Vegas, and it's still hot. We're having a nice day today, but it's still, just a few days ago, it was 100 degrees. So, what a great one. And again, one that I'll always remember. That's if I'm, on my way out, if they're about to pull the plug on Smitty, that's probably a fight I'll have playing in the background.
Yeah. And, before and I know that you have prepared a couple of clips from your TV show regarding interviews with Hearns and Leonard. But before we get to that, since we're not going to be here, you've mentioned this, we're not going to be here next week because you have a visit with the dentist scheduled. But so since we're not going to be here next week, I wanted to cover a couple of fights.
Dr. Nam's going to be doing some serious work on Smitty so we will definitely not be here next week. But go ahead.
Right. So we'll cover a couple of fights that are going to be taking place that following week. Now, September 27th is going to be a very busy boxing day, and that's not a surprise since we're now in the final quarter of the year. ESPN will have a 3-fight card on that day, and the main event will see Sandy Ryan defend her WBO welterweight title against former unified 130-pound champion Michaela Mayer in New York. Now, Ryan is the slight betting favorite, probably because she's coming off because Mayer is coming off a debatable split decision loss against another welterweight champion in Natasha Jonas. But I believe Mayer's work rate, her body punching, and her experience and the home ring advantage will earn her the decision victory. And on the undercard, the undefeated Xander Zayas will fight Mexico's Damian Sosa. And based on what I've seen of Sosa, Xander may have his hands full. I still pick him to win Zayas, but it's not going to be easy. And then the other fight on the card will see Bruce Shushu Carrington fight Suleiman Sagawa. And Sagawa is fresh off a huge upset win over Ruben Villa, who was the #1 WBC featherweight contender at the time. I'm picking Carrington to win as well. On that same night, Alicia Baumgardner will defend her WBC super featherweight title against mandatory challenger Delphine Persoon. Now, Persoon's incredible work rate stands in stark contrast to Baumgardner's tendency to fight in spurts. And if Persoon was a little bit younger, I would probably pick her to win outright. But Pursoon is 39 years old. She's well past her prime. My pick is Baumgardner on points. And in another important women's fight on September 28th, Rhiannon Dixon will defend her WBO lightweight title against Terry Harper in Sheffield, England. Dixon is undefeated. She's 10-0. Harper's coming off back-to-back blemishes, a 10-round draw against Cecilia Brækhus, my choice as the greatest female fighter ever, and a 4th-round corner retirement against Sandy Ryan, who is fighting Michaela Mayer. My pick is Dixon on points. So that's it as far as the previews for the following week. And it's time to bring on the clips.
Okay, and I'll set them up, and I do want to mention a couple of things. We got some great stuff coming up. We've got Bivol and Better Biev, the preview show, and we're going to do some cool stuff. I want to start trying to pay tribute to the 1972 perfect Miami Dolphins. So hopefully we will get a bunch of those dudes on that are still with us and able to do it, and have some fun with that. Of course, a little bit later on in the year, we've got Usyk and Fury 2, if nothing derails that. I don't want to see that fight. I know everybody else does. I don't, because we saw it, and we saw what happened, and I just don't want to see it again, because I guess I picked Usyk to, and I'm picking, you know what? I'm picking Usyk to win it again. It could go either way, but I'm picking Usyk to win it again. But so we've got some really cool stuff on the horizon coming up on In This Corner of the podcast. Great job today. You carried the load for the most part, and we'll end it with a pair of clips with me with Sugar Ray Leonard and the Hitman Tommy Hearns as they talk about their classic first battle that took place right here in Las Vegas in 1981. So long, everybody.
I heard Ray, but I didn't hear him enough. And I knew that because I'm in there with him.
So he wasn't just a pretty boy, was he?
And I see what he did when I heard him and didn't follow through with it. He come right back. And I go, that's what you get for not finishing him. And every time I did that, I paid the price. It was a price I had to pay because I had him ready to go. In my mind, I had him ready to go. And then not finishing the job. When I made that mistake once and I came back and made it twice, I said, if I get him hurt again, I'm gonna take him out.
What did Tommy Hearns mean to your career, Ray?
Everything. I mean, Tommy Hearns. The fight with Tommy Hearns was my most defining moment. I mean, even though I regained my title against Duran and I had a few other couple fights with Kaluli, whatever, the fight with Tommy Hearns kind of sealed my place in boxing history because of what we both represented. I mean, Tommy was looked upon as such a threat, invincible. I mean, Tommy's power was immeasurable.
Well, I'm not a threat. I wasn't a threat.
No, I said that. I admit that.
Was I a threat? Am I a threat now?
Oh, not now, Tommy.
Why you say that?
I mean, you know what?
I want to fight.
Don't want to fight?
Are we gonna book a third fight?
You know what?
I'm a threat. Right?
I'd rather do the TV show.
Let's work.